The sun beat down on Talia Jones as she stepped onto the private pier, her toolbox heavier than the weight of Blake Harding's smirk. A black woman in grease-stained coveralls, she was a speck of grit against the gleaming white of his $50 million yacht, where champagne flutes clinked and laughter mocked her every step. The Florida heat was relentless, the air thick with salt and the faint tang of fuel. Talia adjusted the strap of her toolbox, her boots thudding against the wooden planks of the pier. The yacht, Aurora's pride, loomed ahead, its sleek lines cutting a sharp silhouette against the turquoise water. She'd been called to fix a fuel leak. Urgent, they'd said, though the voice on the phone had sounded more annoyed than desperate. Talia was used to that tone. She'd heard it her whole life, from foremen who doubted her skills to clients who raised eyebrows at her presence. But she was the best mechanic in Miami, and she knew it, even if they didn't. Blake Harding stood on the deck, surrounded by his entourage, men in linen suits and women in designer sundresses, their laughter sharp as glass. He was mid-40s, tanned and broad-shouldered, with the easy arrogance of someone who'd never been told no. His hair, streaked with silver, caught the sunlight as he leaned against the railing, a tumbler of whiskey in hand. "You sure you're in the right place, sweetheart?" he called as Talia approached, his voice dripping with amusement. "Or did you just bring us coffee?" The group erupted in laughter, their eyes raking over her, her braided hair pulled back, her coveralls patched at the knees, her skin glistening with sweat. Talia's jaw tightened, but she kept her face neutral, her brown eyes steady. Keep it together, she told herself. Do the job. Get out. She'd learned long ago that words didn't fix people like Harding. Results did. "I'm here for the fuel leak," she said, her voice calm but firm, betraying none of the heat rising in her chest. She climbed aboard, ignoring the way Harding's guests parted as if she might stain their pristine world. The deck vibrated faintly under her feet, the engine's hum uneven, a telltale sign of trouble. She set her toolbox down with a deliberate thud, the sound cutting through their chatter. Harding raised an eyebrow, swirling his drink. "You know how to hold a wrench, darling?" he asked, his tone mocking. "This isn't a toy boat. Maybe we should call someone qualified." More laughter, sharper now, like a blade against her skin. Talia didn't flinch. She knelt by the engine hatch, popping it open with a practiced flick of her wrist. The smell of fuel hit her, sharp and acrid. 14 minutes, she said, not looking up. "That's how long this'll take." "You can time me," Harding snorted, but his eyes lingered, curiosity flickering beneath the sneer. "Big talk," he said. "Let's see if you can back it up." She didn't respond, her hands already moving. Wrench, screwdriver, a quick check of the fuel line. The leak was in the secondary pump, a sloppy install from whoever had serviced this yacht last. Typical rich man shortcut. Pay for flash, not function. Her fingers worked with precision, muscle memory from years in her father's garage, from nights spent tearing apart engines while the world slept. She was 28, but she'd been fixing machines since she was 10, learning from a man who'd taught her to listen to engines like they were music. The group watched, their chatter fading as Talia worked. She felt their eyes, their skepticism, but she tuned them out, focusing on the rhythm of the repair. A loose clamp, a cracked gasket, she replaced both, using a spare from her toolbox. Then, a spark of inspiration. She rerouted the fuel flow through an old turbine schematic she'd memorized, a trick her father had used on fishing boats. It wasn't standard, but it would stabilize the system, maybe even boost efficiency. 10 minutes, Harding called, checking his watch, his voice laced with mock surprise. "You're running out of time, sweetheart." Talia ignored him, tightening the final bolt. She stood, wiping her hands on a rag, and flipped the engine switch. The hum smoothed out, steady and strong. She glanced at her own watch. 13 minutes, 42 seconds. "Done," she said, closing the hatch. She picked up her toolbox, her movements deliberate, and started toward the gangway. Harding blinked, caught off guard. "Wait, that's it?" he asked, stepping forward. "You're sure it's fixed?" Talia paused, meeting his gaze. His eyes were blue, sharp, but there was a crack in his confidence, a flicker of doubt. "Start the engine," she said. "See for yourself." He hesitated, then nodded to his crew. The yacht roared to life, the engine purring like a contented cat. The group murmured, impressed despite themselves. Harding's smirk faltered, but he recovered quickly. "Not bad," he said, crossing his arms. "For a garage girl." Talia's fingers tightened around her toolbox handle, but she didn't take the bait. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a manila folder, its edges worn from nights spent hunched over her workbench. She dropped it on a nearby table, the sound sharp in the sudden quiet. "Something for you to look at," she said, her voice low, steady. "Since you like big toys." Harding raised an eyebrow, but before he could respond, she turned and walked off the yacht, her boots echoing on the pier. The folder lay there, unopened, as his guests resumed their chatter, dismissing her as quickly as she'd arrived. But Talia felt the weight of that folder in her bones. It wasn't just a repair manual or a parts list. It was her life's work, a prototype design for a hydrogen fuel converter that could power a yacht like Aurora's Pride without a drop of diesel. She'd built it in her garage, scavenging parts, testing theories, driven by a vision of a cleaner, smarter future. As she drove away in her battered pickup, the yacht's lights fading in her rearview mirror, she felt a spark of defiance. Harding's words stung, but they weren't new. She'd heard worse, on job sites, in boardrooms, from men who saw her skin, her gender, her worn-out clothes, and assumed she was less. But she wasn't less. And soon, they'd all know it. The week after the yacht repair was a blur of grease and grit for Talia. Her days were spent in the shop, fixing fishing boats and delivery vans for clients who barely paid on time. Her nights were her own, spent in her garage, the air thick with solder and ambition. The hydrogen converter prototype sat on her workbench, a tangle of wires and steel, humming with potential. She'd poured everything into it, years of study, scrapped designs, her father's old engineering books. It wasn't just a machine, it was a revolution. A way to make yachts and ships run clean, cutting fuel costs and emissions to near zero. She'd tested it on a small motor last month, and the results were staggering. 90% efficiency, no waste. But the world didn't care about a mechanic's dreams, not when she was a black woman from a rough neighborhood, scraping by on odd jobs. Her inbox was full of rejections from tech firms and investors, all variations of the same theme. Interesting, but not viable. Too risky. Who are you anyway? She'd sent the converter's schematics to dozens of companies, but only one had responded, a curt email from a naval contractor asking for a full proposal. She'd been working on it nonstop, her fingers stained with ink and oil, her eyes burning from lack of sleep. Harding's mockery still stung, a fresh bruise on an old wound. She'd grown up in a world that underestimated her, teachers who skipped over her raised hand, bosses who assigned her the grunt work, clients who questioned her every move. Her father had been her shield, teaching her to wield a wrench in her mind with equal precision. "They'll try to make you small," he'd said before he passed. "Don't let them." She didn't, but the pressure was mounting. Her landlord had raised the rent again, and her shop's lease was up in 2 months. She needed a break, a chance to get her converter in front of the right people. The folder she'd left on Harding's yacht was a long shot, a defiant gesture born of frustration. She didn't expect him to read it, let alone understand it. Men like him didn't see past their own egos. But Harding was looking for her. She didn't know it yet, but the folder had caught his attention. He'd opened it that night, half drunk, expecting a mechanic's scribbles. Instead, he found detailed schematics, efficiency charts, a vision for a fuel system that could disrupt the entire maritime industry. He'd laughed at first, thinking it a prank, but the math checked out. He'd shown it to his engineer, a grizzled MIT grad who'd whistled low and said, "This is game-changing. Who is this woman?" Harding had called her shop, but Talia was out on a job. He'd tracked down her address, only to find a locked garage and a neighbor who said she was always working. He was annoyed, then intrigued, then obsessed. He wasn't used to being outplayed, especially not by someone he'd dismissed as the help. Meanwhile, Talia faced her own battles. At the shop, a client, a yacht broker with a slick smile, refused to pay her full rate, claiming her repair was adequate at best. She stood her ground, her voice calm but unyielding, until he relented, tossing the cash on the counter like it burned him. Later, at a local tech meetup, she pitched her converter to a room of mostly white, mostly male investors. They listened politely, but their questions were laced with condescension. "Have you considered the scalability? What's your background? Do you have a team?" She answered everyone, her data airtight, but their smiles were thin, their eyes already looking past her. The rejection stung, but it fueled her. She worked harder, refining the converter, tweaking the design. She stayed up until dawn, her garage lit by a single bulb, her hands steady as she soldered circuits. She was close, so close to a working model she could demonstrate. The naval contractor had asked for a prototype by next week, and she was determined to deliver. Then, one evening, her phone rang. An unknown number, but the voice was unmistakable. Harding, his tone smoother now, almost respectful. "Ms. Jones, I read your folder," he said. "Impressive work. Let's talk. I could fund your project, get you in front of the right people." Talia's grip tightened on the phone. She could hear the shift in his voice, the hunger for what she'd created. But she remembered his smirk, his sweetheart, the way his guests had laughed. "I'm busy," she said, her voice cold. "Try someone else." She hung up, her heart racing. She didn't need Harding. She'd find her own way. But the pressure was crushing, bills piling up, the deadline looming, the world waiting for her to fail. She looked at the converter, its steel casing gleaming under the garage light. "This is my shot," she thought. "I won't let them take it." Talia stood in a sterile conference room at the Pentagon, her prototype converter on the table, its hum quiet but steady. The naval contractor, a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, leaned forward, studying the device. "You built this in a garage?" she asked, her tone equal parts disbelief and admiration. Talia nodded, her coveralls replaced by a simple blazer, her braids pulled back. "Yes, ma'am. It's 92% efficient, zero emissions. Scalable for ships, yachts, even subs." She clicked through her presentation, graphs and data flashing on the screen. The room, filled with military brass and engineers, listened in silence, their skepticism giving way to murmurs of interest. A week earlier, she delivered the prototype to the contractor, a sleepless marathon of final tweaks and tests. The results had been undeniable. Her converter outperformed every existing system, cutting fuel costs and environmental impact. The contractor had called her the next day, requesting an urgent meeting. Now, here she was, in a room she'd never imagined entering, pitching her life's work to people who could change the world. Harding had tried to reach her again, leaving voicemails, offering partnerships, investments, apologies. She'd ignored them all. His yacht, his wealth, his mockery, they were nothing compared to this moment. She'd clawed her way here, through doubt and dismissal, her father's voice echoing in her mind. "Don't let them make you small." The contractor stood, extending a hand. "Ms. Jones, we're prepared to offer you a contract. Exclusive development, full funding. This could reshape naval propulsion." Talia shook her hand, her heart soaring. The room applauded, a sound that drowned out years of sneers and slights. She thought of Harding, his smirk, his coffee girl jab. He'd underestimated her, like so many others. But she'd built something bigger than his yacht, bigger than his world. As she left the Pentagon, her prototype in a secure case, her phone buzzed. Another message from Harding. "Name your price, Talia. Let's make history together." She deleted it, a smile tugging at her lips. She was already making history, on her terms.